With Donald Trump freezing military aid to Ukraine and demanding European allies spend more on their own defence, is this the end of the so-called special relationship and NATO itself?
Whenever necessary, we've absolutely backed each other up, and that's at the core.
Could you take on Russia by yourselves?
Well,
I'm joined now by Joe Glenton, a former British Army soldier, now author and journalist, to talk about the latest developments between Washington and London. Great to have you with us, Joe.
Thank you.
Joe, what do you make of the recent events that have unfolded from the Oval Office?
It's been very interesting to watch the kind of scramble, particularly Starmer's reaction, which was to kind of hurry back to Europe and found what he's probably unwisely called a coalition of the willing. That's how it's being reported, which is an odd choice for a Labour Prime Minister, given that's what his predecessor Tony Blair called the coalition that invaded Iraq. But yeah, it seems to have been pretty hectic, and he's been trying to build support for the existing foreign policy consensus that we've known for many years around Europe, kind of minus America. But it's a very interesting moment for sure.
There's been a lot of anger in Parliament, particularly at the US Vice President's remarks, J.D. Vance, who referred to that coalition of the willing, talking about
20,000 troops from some random country that hasn't fought a war in 30 or 40 years.
I mean, some people took this as referring to Britain. I'm not sure exactly if it was, but you were part of the war in Afghanistan, where Gordon Brown, Tony Blair, they sent troops to Helmand. Many British soldiers were killed or maimed, purely just to show how close of an ally we were to the United States. Do you think there is a real sense of betrayal there? What was this all for?
The reason we ended up in Afghanistan in 2006 fundamentally is because we had failed in Iraq. The Americans were very critical of our conduct in Basra, and there was a desperation in the British foreign policy establishment, the government of the day, to stay close to America, to continue this special relationship, so-called. And so we offered our services, as it were, in Helmand, and we cited all kinds of historical campaigns, Malaya, Northern Ireland, obviously believing those were successes, which is completely, you can argue about that. But there was a clear desperation there. And I think that that still exists, that the UK wants to cling to America's coattails still, but it seems like that time has passed, at least for the moment, at least while Donald Trump's in. It's interesting, Vance's comments are very interesting. Of course, he's a veteran himself, though I understand he was in some kind of media ops. But he's one example of something we've seen both sides of the Atlantic is ex-military people. I think they're seen as being, by nature of being by dint of being in the military, good leaders and good figures to support. And actually, they're not a particularly impressive group of people in terms of their analysis, in terms of their politics. And but it's interesting that more and more democratic institutions have been militarised in this way. There's the idea that having served in these failed campaigns in Iraq and Afghanistan qualifies you to take up political office. I think that's something we need to challenge more firmly.
One of the most striking things for me watching the Oval Office meeting between Starmer and Trump was when Trump turned to him and said, could Britain fight Russia on its own? Of course, under NATO outspent the Russian military by a vast amount. I think UK and Russian military spending are about the same. But what did you make of that kind of moment? Was Trump basically saying, you guys go it alone if you really want to support Ukraine this much?
Trump is, for better or worse, operating outside the foreign policy consensus, which has been established, which gave Iraq and Afghanistan. That's not to say he's a dove. We saw it during his last period as president. He was willing to use military force, quite happy to do it, particularly to stave off internal crises. I think you remember the mother of all bombs being dropped in Afghanistan, SEAL raid in Yemen, and stuff like that. But my sense is that that special relationship, so-called, which always, in my view, was more important to Britain. It was something the Brits talked about more than the Americans. But it seems for the moment it's over. We don't know what's going to happen in 4 or 5 years with another US election. But I think it's probably a significant moment.
Like you say, the Brits have taken this special relationship really seriously, and a lot of our military policy has been based around buying US systems or working so closely with the US. I'm thinking particularly on our nuclear weapons, which, as I understand, we effectively rent from the US in some senses. Could we really go it alone at all?
If we were going to kind of continue being belligerent, it would be hard to. I think we live under American control, particularly in terms of the nuclear arsenal and stuff like that. I would like to think though I don't think Starmer will be the man to lead us, I would like to think this is an opportunity for a break with the foreign policy consensus, which has existed for many years, and start, in a sense, we're a military colony of the US. There are a lot of American bases here, and there are a lot of controversial issues attached to those in terms of sovereignty. The issue of nukes, again, they're in a sense leased from America. My understanding is if we didn't have American support, they would become pretty much defunct and useless within a relatively short period of time, because maintenance and parts, as I understand it, come from the US. So whether or not it's taken up, by this government, I do sense there could be an opportunity to push for a different role for Britain in the world.
The UK military has these bases all over the world. So we've got a tank training ground out in Canada with a load of armoured vehicles stationed out there. Recently we built a new tank training ground in Oman. We've got bases in Brunei, defending the Sultan of Brunei out there, loads of Gurkhas stationed out, in Southeast Asia. Can we now still afford to have those troops scattered all over the world? If we're pursuing this belligerent line against Russia, we perhaps can no longer rely on the US. Is it finally time to bring those troops home, the kind of relics of empire, bring them back and actually have them in the UK or Europe to defend the mainland?
Yeah, that is exactly what they are, I would say, relics of empire. I spent some time in Kenya out there. We've got a massive training area. There are obviously lots of controversial issues around the British military presence in Kenya. Declassified's reported on it. And all those other, I think it probably is time. Again, I feel like there is a window. It's just a question of whether there's the political will to take it up. But there is a lot of kit and a lot of personnel on these extremely expensive to run bases. Often within those places, Kenya being an obvious example, there's quite a lot of resistance to the British continuing that kind of post-colonial or actually colonial presence. So I think it might be a good time to bring that stuff back, because it costs taxpayers money. If there are cuts to be made, if you believe that rationale, then it seems that is an obvious place to start to me.
General Sir Nick Carter, the former head of the British military, he said recently on Question Time that Britain's air defences were so depleted that if London came under drone attack from Russia, drone and missile attack, all that the military could really do would be park a destroyer in the Thames. They wouldn't have anything else to defend the capital city with. Yet at the same time, for many years, we've had air defence systems parked out in Saudi Arabia to defend their oil refineries. So what's going on here? Have we really just not been spending on air defences, or is it just being parked around the world? I mean, what do you make of this?
Yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it? I tend to, and increasingly looking at what's going on today, come back to this idea of neutrality and of bringing stuff home that we've got parked around the world. That's not to say we're not going to have an army, but I think we need to, if we're serious about a threat from Russia, then why have we got so much kit scattered around the world? I think that's a serious question.
Seeing a fresh campaign on TV of army recruitment adverts. It seems like they're desperate to get more people joining the military. But at the same time, there have been this constant stream of stories about sexual harassment and racism, which you'd think would put off a lot of people from even applying in the first place. Do you think they're going to manage to get more people to sign up? Yeah,
it's been recruitment, and the problems with recruitment have been discussed a lot in the last few weeks. And there tend to be two kind of extreme poles. One of them, which you'll see in the right-wing press, is that kids are too woke and they don't want to join the army because they're unpatriotic or whatever. And the other side is that the influence of Iraq and Afghanistan for young people is keeping them out of the military. And I think there's elements of truth about both of those. I think there are kind of systemic problems. The poverty draft hasn't gone away. We know what the country looks like economically. It's not great. There are still people who will see that as an option. And there are also still people who will have internalised the idea that ideas about patriotism and masculinity and stuff, the same reasons I joined. So they fall victim of the system, as in the British economy as well. But there's also a problem with the recruiting systems, which have changed hands a couple of times, but for a long time have been outsourced to private companies, Capita significantly, which was forever getting slated by the various accountability committees. So it's also about the march of neoliberalism into institutions which had traditionally been run by the state, and there was some degree of democratic accountability. So it's not to say that it's not true that I'm sure young people are very aware of Iraq and Afghanistan. Young people are very disturbed about Gaza and British involvement in that. Definitely, I think young people, there are endless, every week there seems to be reports about racism, sexual harassment, sexual violence in the military. So those things are definitely true, but there's also a problem with the systems that are being used to recruit.
And faced with a choice between spending more on the military or more on the NHS, what do you think the British public would vote for?
There's so much scaremongery at the moment. You would think the Russians are about to kind of come over the horizon. And it seems like a constant bombardment in the last few weeks, particularly. These campaigns seem to be launched and relaunched, like the army recruiting stuff normally comes out in January. And Remembrance Day and Armed Forces Day always seem to be used for a bunch of puff pieces by ex-generals saying we need more money. So I think we need to be able to pin down the facts of where money needs to go, which is kind of difficult when generals and politicians are constantly scaremongering. I would say, as someone who's from a working class community, that we need to spend more on things that people actually need. But it's about how we make that argument, I think. And I don't think Labour government or not, however you think about it, I don't think this government is going to do that. It seems absolutely committed to continuing the same foreign policy consensus that gave us Iraq and Afghanistan and has given us Gaza recently. So it's for people outside government, I think, on the streets through various forms of activism to challenge those narratives and put resources where they need to be.
Thanks, Joe. It's great to get your take on what's happened recently. I think you've got a really unique perspective, having served in the army and then being a conscientious objector. Your analysis won't really be seen in many other media outlets. So yeah, it's great to have you on Declassified. If you're watching this video and you haven't already subscribed to our channel, please hit the button below. It helps it reach a wider audience. And if you want to donate to our work, you can do so via the Super Thanks button or by going on our website and joining us from £3 a month. Please also check out the work that Joe's doing over at Forces Watch. Thanks for watching.